to make it unique to DeepL, again, while kind of upholding what are best practices when you're bringing in talent. We want to take more risks and really be the most innovative company in our space. We took those 3 core areas that we know that we want to hire, which again were growth mindset, subject matter expertise, and values alignment. Yeah. So we wanted to make sure that everybody felt really comfortable and confident assessing for growth mindset in the hiring team stage. If you overcomplicate and end up taking 6 months to create it, then it may be a little bit different by the time you launch it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Leaders in Talent podcast. And I'm here today with Amanda Johnson in Amsterdam. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you.
Amanda is currently the head of TA at DeepL, a global leader in the language AI space. And before joining DeepL, Amanda worked at companies like Uber, Project 44, and Salesforce, and led different TA organizations in that capacity. Originally, you're from the US, but you've lived for almost 10 years in Europe.
10 years, yeah.
How many of those years in the Netherlands?
7.
7.
7 years now.
7. Yeah. So you really embraced the rain and the cold in the Netherlands.
Exactly.
Huh? Yeah, awesome. And has extensive experience leading international teams. Amanda, officially welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Today we're going to be talking about hiring philosophy and hiring principles.
Great.
Fascinating topic, so I'm really happy that we get a chance to dive into this particular topic. But before we go into that space, can you tell me a little bit more about what DeepL does and what your role is at the company?
Yeah, of course. I'll start with DeepL. And as you had already mentioned, DeepL is a leader in the language AI technology space. Yeah. Headquartered in Cologne, Germany. We have over 100,000 business customers using us and millions of users worldwide. And our mission is really to break down language barriers.
Are you facing market volatility, need to hire quickly, or have a team that sits idle? Meet Matcher, your flexible recruitment and sourcing partner. Scale your recruitment capacity up or down without compromising on quality. Trusted by Booking.com, Miro, Heineken, Grammarly, and Deal, Matcher is the RPO disruptor making waves in Europe and the US. For scale-ups and corporates, Matcher covers engineering, go-to-market, and G&A roles. Visit Matcher.io to see how we can support you. That's matchr.io.
So really bringing cultures closer together.
Yeah.
And we're growing a lot. We're a global company, so we have presence here in Europe in several different hubs. In Tokyo, Japan, Austin, US, and we just opened our New York tech hub. So really exciting. Yeah. And then a little bit about my role here at DeepL. As you said, I'm leading our global talent acquisition team. I started in February, so still recently new, but very happy with my choice.
Amazing.
Choosing DeepL.
Amazing. When we started, preparing for this podcast, quite quickly we actually landed on the topic of hiring philosophy. Because when you were interviewing for the role of head of TA at DeepL, they ask you in the interview process, what is the first thing you would focus on and would prioritize? And you mentioned the hiring philosophy at DeepL, which I find an amazing and interesting answer. So tell me a little bit more, what is hiring philosophy according to you and why is it important to you?
You're completely right. When I was interviewing for the role, that was one of the questions that came up. They always ask kind of the 30, 60, 90-day plan, of course. And one thing that I think is really important at any company that you're at is really defining and articulating how you hire and who you hire, just to gain alignment on like what's important for us, at least right now at DeepL. We are a fast-moving, fast-growing scale-up. So that may change year over year. It is something worth kind of pausing and looking at it again every year, especially if you've been here for a couple of years. But me as coming in as somebody new, a new leader to the team, I wanted to understand kind of what is important to this company, what are some of the soft skills that they're looking for when they're hiring for employees, as well as like the hard and technical skills too. But really defining that, articulating it so that you know what you're looking for. You can set up a very structured process to assess against those things. And really, most importantly, gaining alignment across like your hiring communities, your hiring managers, interviewers, of what is that we're looking for. And so they feel really set up for success on how to do that. Yeah. So that's why it was important to me. I think it's really just defining what your hiring bar is and what's important to you, and then enabling everyone else to be able to do that like in a structured way.
Was there anything in the interview process that made you say, like, hey, I think this is something, that could help DeepL? Or?
No, nothing like stood out to me. If I would have joined and they had this all like really well defined and articulated already, I probably would have been great. Like, you're ahead of it. Like, let's kind of go with this. But like I said, DeepL was really, and we still are evolving and growing and changing really fast. So I think it's even a good exercise to do like once a year when you're in this kind of fast moving space.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right, so let's dive into that space, right? Mm-hmm. So you got the job. Mm-hmm. How did you go about the process of creating these hiring principles?
Yeah, so I did a lot of listening and kind of understanding of what was already working at DeepL. Yeah. Like the team had been hired before me. They've been hiring amazing people already. Yeah. Something that attracted me to DeepL was how everyone I interviewed with spoke so highly about the culture and like it's a very special place to be, and I would see when I joined, and I wanted to make sure that we were capturing that and I was understanding how they continue to add people and kind of maintain this amazing culture. So that was something I really tried to understand through just meeting with my own team, meeting with my stakeholders, holding kind of interviews around this, understanding our current way of hiring and what does the process look like. So I didn't want to come in and completely change everything, right? Yeah. I wanted to maintain the things that my team was already doing really well. What I had to add to it was asking some of these pretty basic and foundational questions, but maybe weren't, again, really well defined or articulated, of like, these are the 3 core things that we look for in who we hire. Yeah. And these are like the 3 to 5 things of how we hire. Yeah. So the process of creating the hiring principles is what we call them. Again, was doing some of this internal kind of understanding, research, interviewing, and we interviewed our executive team, including our CEO, to understand like what is that kind of the core attributes that he's looking for, as well as looking at what are some best practices that are happening in the industry too. So we did some industry benchmarking to kind of see how other companies do this. We tried to simplify it where we could. We put together our principles, which consists of our hiring standards, is like our first kind of bucket that we defined, then who we hire, how we hire, and how we make decisions. So it's as simple as that. It's almost like a charter of this is how we do it here. And we wanted to make it unique to DeepL, again, while kind of upholding what are best practices when you're bringing in talent. And yeah, I didn't mention this before, but one reason why I think this is so important, like along with kind of defining your bar and knowing what looks good for your own company at this current moment in time, is also it allows you to really set up the structured hiring, which I think I slightly mentioned, but that is like the best way to keep hiring quality high and to reduce bias in your interview process. So that's also very important to me. But I think you do need to kind of start at the beginning, start at the foundation, and really define who are you looking for? What is
was there anything that you discovered in that process by doing such a deep dive and really focusing on this that you, for example, from the executive team that came through in terms of, hey, like actually they might be looking for something else?
We landed with 3 core attributes, I guess, of who we hire. So 3 buckets. And the first one is really what came from our CEO, Jarek. So the first one is growth mindset. That was something that continued to come up, and that's what he really grasped onto. And I think because we are going through this moment of change and we want to take more risks and really be the most innovative company in our space, that's kind of what he continued to come back to, is that the people we hire need to have this kind of growth mindset rather than like a fixed mindset per se. So that was number 1 of what we came up with of who we hire. The other one was, again, as we're continuing to grow, we're in a space where we did need a little bit more subject matter expertise in some areas. So typically in a startup, you hire a lot of generalists that can do like anything and everything, right? And that has served us really well. But as we continue to grow and kind of build out our go-to-market team, you may need to kind of specialize potentially in different verticals, or specialize in the company size that you're selling into, or the customer support functions and whatnot. So we really started to see that there's certain roles that do require a different level of subject matter expertise and kind of commercial awareness. So that is number 2 of who we hire. And that's where you get a little bit of flexibility too in your hiring process, because engineering hiring might look very different than sales hiring. And we didn't want to make it so structured that they couldn't have enough flexibility. And then the third one that was also very important to our CEO and our leadership team was values alignment. So the third bucket is like our culture and values alignment. And those are just the 3 that we're sticking with for now. So we, again, wanted to keep it as simple as possible so it's really easy for our hiring communities to absorb and then be able to enable them to assess against these areas.
So you defined these 3 core values and principles, so to say. Then what?
So then, so the second piece of the hiring principles was how we hire, right? And so there's like 3 or 4 kind of principles there. One was structured hiring. So then we had to go and build that. So that would be like the immediate next step, which I'll get into. But we also had like inclusive interview process was important to us. Exceptional candidate experience was important to us. And yeah, that might be the rest of like how we hire. And then the last piece of it was like how we make decisions. So that was like hiring manager accountability in the decision making, but also always having a debrief to make sure we're able to make kind of more diverse decisions by having all of the input from the different interviewers. So the next step then, when we all felt really good about the hiring principles, we like shared it out to the company and then was just like, okay, how do we build this into our actual process? At the time, we were also beginning an implementation of a new ATS. So we were like, this is perfect timing. Let's make sure that everything that we kind of revamp from this process can get aligned into our systems and make it come to life through our ATS. And so what we did was we took those 3 core areas that we know that we want to hire, which again were growth mindset, subject matter expertise, and values alignment. And we aligned them to a certain stage of the interview process. And so we were setting up our new stages that were structured across the entire company, and we kept them pretty high level, and then allowed flexibility within the stages. So to give a practical example of what that may look like, we have the beginning, which is like the kind of screening stage. And that's where like application review, recruiter screen, and hiring team screen belong. And then we move into like the panel stage. And that is where we put our practical interviews and our culture and values kind of assessment. And then we kind of move to debrief and offer. So it's very kind of high level to start, and then there's flexibility within the different stages that you have.
Because did you also change the overall recruitment process in terms of stages, or that was said and done, but you just layered over?
Again, I tried to take the best of what was already happening. So for some groups, there wasn't much of a difference when we kind of aligned this. But for some others, there was just some moving around and kind of reducing of some steps that maybe weren't needed throughout the hiring process. And just making sure that there was alignment, that each of these different kind of core things that we look for in who we hired was for sure covered off on. So how we did that was we put the growth mindset piece into the hiring team screen. And in order to do that, you actually have to break down growth mindset and find the attributes.
And that's the second stage in the recruitment process?
And then we aligned the subject matter expertise piece to the practical interviews. And so a practical interview in sales may be a case study that they do or a presentation. And then a practical interview on the tech side may be like a machine learning interview or a live coding challenge. And so that is like the subject matter expertise piece. And then every single interview wraps up with the values alignment interview. And that's where you can actually start to kind of cross-team interview a bit. It doesn't have to be someone from your own team assessing the values piece. And so that was kind of part one of like, okay, where are we going to make sure that each of these areas is assessed in each interview process? But we also had to build what that actually looks like for an interviewer. So we had to translate, okay, growth mindset is what's important, but what does that actually mean? And so we pulled out 5 or 6 attributes, behavioral attributes that may lead to a growth mindset. So that may be like learning from mistakes or failures or being open to feedback. And then for each of those 6 attributes, we created a handful of questions that you can ask in an interview. And then we translated that to a training that every interviewer has to take. So we wanted to make sure that everybody felt really comfortable and confident assessing for growth mindset in the hiring team stage. that also then meant that we set that up in our ATS. So it was like, again, very easy to use and kind of brought to life systematically with a feedback form that actually you have to assess the growth mindset attributes on.
Yeah.
Same thing happened for the subject matter expertise and the practical interviews, and then also the values, culture and values interviews at the end. So we have our core values that then we translated into behavioral attributes for each one. And then again, there's interview questions that help you assess each of those behavioral attributes. So again, it's really helping to enable the teams kind of understand what do we mean by those certain values, or what do we mean by growth mindset? How do you actually practically bring that to life? So.
And how, because this sounds like a really structured, thought through process. How do you rule the overall company and the different stakeholders that might have to do something differently or get different input or maybe not even agree with all the principles?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a work in progress, I will say. So there's some...
How long ago
we launched the principles in June.
Yeah.
And then we launched structured hiring at the same time as our new ATS, which was September 1st.
Wow, yeah.
And again, some groups were already very structured before. Yeah. Some groups were less structured. So we do have to take a bit of a customized approach and kind of a personal approach with each of the different groups. What I would say that it's been received quite well in general. I think everybody understands why structured hiring is important. What are the benefits of it? Again, everybody wants high quality of hire and everybody wants an unbiased process. So all of that, like in theory, makes complete sense. I think for some of the groups that are used to doing it a certain way or want a little bit more of that flexibility, we do offer the flexibility in the panel stage. If you want to add an extra interview, of course you need to have what are you assessing against and have a reason for it. But that's where like some teams may have 2 or 3 interviews in the panel stage, and another team may have up to 4 interviews in that stage. And we are allowing a bit of that flexibility there because we understand that every team might be slightly different. Yeah. And I would say, for teams that needed a little bit more kind of convincing, or kind of influencing on this, like we always just use the data, right? So wherever we can, and again, our ATS is new, so our own data, we're still building up, and it will take some time before it's really, really actionable. But industry data, there's so many studies on why this is important and how it actually helps your team with quality and efficiency, et cetera. And like, we're a very data-oriented company. We're a very research-driven company. Yeah. So that is like the best way to kind of get the buy-in from the stakeholders.
Okay, great, great. Hey, and now this is in place. What do your recruitment team say about this?
It's a bit of a journey, but I think that there wasn't so much pushback. It was just the training element and making sure that the team really felt supported, kind of set up for success, and like enabling their hiring teams. So we did a lot. One, we wanted to bring them along for the journey. So I'm speaking as if this was all me, but it absolutely was not. Like the entire DeepL's TA team really built this. So I think bringing them in from the very beginning, one of my TA leads was really leading the hiring principles piece. She also helped kind of lead the structured hiring piece, but everybody, it was like cross-team project groups, and it was really everybody rolling up their sleeves and getting it done. Yeah. So I think 1, bringing the team along for the journey, and 2, trying to like lead with why. That's always, I think, the way to introduce change, of course, is starting with the why. That also helped. And again, it's still a work in progress. So even next year, like we've launched structured hiring, we've launched the hiring principles. Part of like our goals for next year is really embedding it and making sure it's really adopted across the teams. And our TA team will have to drive that.
And in terms of the role of the recruiters and the TA specialists that are driving this, do they also like check if the hiring managers, like if the different stages that people are actually adhering to the process, is that also part of their role?
Well, yes, they are there to advise and like really be a true talent partner. So absolutely. And we set it up from the very beginning of like the intake of the job and make sure that everybody's aligned on what does the process look like, who's responsible for covering what in our structured hiring process. But our system also now allows it and forces it a bit. So we set it up, again, want to give the team flexibility where it makes sense, but also didn't want to set up our brand new, beautiful ATS where there's too much customization, where things can just get a little bit messy when everybody's going in their own direction. So we set it up where we only allowed a little bit of flexibility kind of within the stages, but everyone at the company follows the main stages at the high level.
Yeah.
And that can't be changed in the system.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You really got to watch out what you can and cannot adjust.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think everybody has the best intentions with that. But again, if everybody's going in different directions, then your brand new ATS might just be a bit messy. And that's not what we want when we just launched it.
And do you feel it was a blessing or a curse that you launched a new ATS at the same time?
It was such a busy summer.
Yeah.
I think in the end, it was the right move because I didn't want to have to set up an ATS maybe with old legacy processes that were going to change anyway. But it was very busy. Everybody was tired after the summer.
And you continue to hire, right?
Yeah. So I think it was the right timing. It was just a lot at once.
Yeah. Also to put things in, how many employees does DeepL have?
Yeah, good question. So when we were launching the principles and the structured hiring, we were just under 1,000, and now we're just over 1,000.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Significant growth.
Yeah.
And reasonably sized sized companies. And the TA team is roughly around
20 people total.
20 people. Yeah. Spread over different time zones.
Yeah.
Right.
We have the majority of the team here in Europe, but also somebody in Tokyo and Austin.
Yeah. Amazing. You've done something similar at Uber. 12 months, if I'm not mistaken, took around 12 months.
Yes.
You've done this in roughly 6 to 8 weeks. Tell me a little bit more. What was the magic that you were able to cut down time so significantly? I mean,
the big difference between the two is scale, right? So we were around 1,000 employees when we were launching here at DeepL. And at Uber at the time, when I was picking up the project, we were over 20,000 employees. So very different in scale. And I just think that...
And you did it at Uber for the global organization? Okay, wow.
Yeah. And we... I would say just being with the smaller scale, you're able to be more agile. It's a little bit less pressure too, because again, like I said, when you're moving so fast and changing so much, like I'll review this again in a year.
Yeah.
Uber at the time, they already had a huge brand, huge kind of operations. We had hired somebody to help us like define the principles too. So an external consultant was there. And I just think that there's just bigger pressure in that instance too, when you have such a big global brand that, employer brand and also kind of like corporate brand that people are watching a bit. And because it's so big, it's not something you have the capacity or want to change once a year, right? So if you're going to commit to something, that is their principles for like the next 5 years. So I think that's just some of the differences.
Do you share your principles with candidates?
We don't, not like the actual principles themselves, but we had just launched our new careers page this year too with our new ATS.
Of course.
And we have
another project.
And we have our hiring process on there. So you kind of know the structured hiring process, what to expect.
Yeah. But the structured hiring process can differ across roles?
So just the high level where it's like you start with some screening. You have the panel stage, there'll be a debrief, the culture values assessment, just like a high level what to expect.
I know you've recently launched it, but what do you feel, is your general take on the success or how it's landed in the organization?
Just having the alignment is really helpful. It helps with the enablement. It helps kind of setting the scene from the very beginning. So there's kind of like less questions. There's less of that, let me just add one more interviewer into the process, right? So it's just a little bit crisper and more efficient. Our time to hire went down last month. So like, again, we're a few months in, so it's really hard. The data will tell in a few months from now, I think. But my general sentiment is that it just is easier. And again, the alignment is key. So,
in terms of advice to other TA leaders that might be thinking about doing this or that have never created a hiring philosophy, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I would say don't overcomplicate it. I think that depending on where your company is and their maturity or how big the company is or kind of how fast you can move, I think I've seen even my peers trying to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that you actually put a lot of pressure on yourself because they are super important, right? It's defining your bar and how you hire. But I think if you don't overcomplicate it and you just kind of try to simplify it a bit, I think that is my piece of advice, because you can always go back and tweak some things, and it's just good to have something there, see how it goes. And our like culture, and we have a growth mindset, of course, is to continue to iterate, try new things, try to be innovative with it. But if you overcomplicate and end up taking 6 months to create it, then or more, then it may be a little bit different by the time you launch it. So I would just say, don't overcomplicate it. Try to simplify it. You're probably already doing some really good things, and it's just putting it down on paper.
And let's say, so we would like to start with this. Like, what would you say if you can put some steps and like, okay, do this, do this, do this. Like, what would your take be?
Yeah, I would think about what are those core kind of attributes you're looking for in who you hire, and again, trying to make it broad, right? Every function will have different competencies or technical skills you have to assess, and this isn't the place to put all of that. I would put the high level things that like every kind of employee you may be looking for. So values are a great place to start. If you have company values, that would be absolutely the first place I would look at, because that is something that you can assess every candidate for, no matter what function they're going into. And then I would think about, okay, how important is structured hiring to you? Do I have a structured process? How can I align these things into that? So those would be the two places I would start. But if you had to start somewhere, I would just go with values. You probably already have those.
And also get the buy-in from senior leadership to make sure.
Definitely. And understand too, like what's important to them. If you can even probably look on, ChatGPT of interview questions you can ask. And start there to make sure that you're covering your bases. There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of work that's already been done around this. So again, like looking around some best practices, seeing what other companies are doing, what are they putting out there. But if you're actually building a principle, I think values is a good place to start.
Awesome.
Because that also will help you get alignment. Like your leadership team probably also agrees, if these values are important to us, that it's something we should be looking at.
Right? Like it's the company values.
And our values may change over time too. So once they change eventually, then we'll bring it back to our hiring process to make sure that it's reflected of how the values may look in the future.
You launch a new career site, implement a new ATS, finalize your hiring principles. What's next?
Good question. Some sleep and some rest.
Great.
We are winding down for the year. So I think, I'm bringing my whole TA team together in a couple weeks in Cologne in our HQ. And our agenda is really half of it focused on reflecting on the year. Like looking at all the achievements that we've made, all the data. So what did we actually deliver from a hire, is time to hire, kind of core KPIs. And again, now we have a new ATS, so we have like a little bit more kind of insightful data. And then speaking about lessons learned and things like that. And then half of the time already starting to like really think about next year and put some planning into place. So I like to align our own TA strategy to the company strategy, and that is just being kind of finalized for next year. So we know some of our core themes. The hiring plan is almost set for next year. So we'll be using that to kind of be creative and brainstorm and think about what's important for us. I do know that like customer first is a big theme. So I think we'll be looking at how we can improve our candidate experience next year for sure. I'm just starting to finalize our first very intentional, like diverse hiring strategy. We've been doing a lot of it already, but again, it's been kind of organic and in pockets and doing quite well as a company. But I think just having some intention behind it is really important. So that will be a focus for next year. And then just like we launched so much that I think we just need some time to embed and make sure the adoption is there and to iterate. I have found in the past that sometimes you just launch, then you kind of forget to maintain. So I don't want to forget to maintain. I want to make sure that what we have launched really is sticky and it's adopted. And if there's areas that we have to tweak or change, we're like really paying attention to that.
Awesome. That sounds like a really good couple of months ahead. Amanda, what is the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Yeah. You can
Awesome.
find me, Amanda Johnson at DeepL.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. Really insightful.
Thank you.
Really
Yeah, it was
enjoyed
great.
being here at your WeWork in Amsterdam. And yeah, let's do this again soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye.